Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, hello everybody. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show. Shane Kohler here with you today. Pleasure to be back and excited to be kicking off our first show on Podbean. So we're live streaming on Podbean today versus Instagram. A little bit different platform, but it's exciting to try something new and get started with this. So hello to all the listeners who are joining me today on Podbean. Great to have you with me live. To all the listeners who will be hearing this podcast later, hello to you and thanks for listening in with us today. And today I wanted to talk about maybe a sensitive topic, a challenging topic a little bit. This is something that I think a lot of us struggle with. The title of today's episode is How to Nurture the Best from a Man Without Mothering Him. And in thinking about today's episode, there was a lot that went into it. There's been a lot that has come up recently on social media with different posts I've been kind of looking at, or things I posted myself, and some of the response that's come from the audience. There's been just, I think, in the conversation of polarity and masculine, feminine energy, which some of you may be aware, but if not, I should shout it out right now, that I am hosting a workshop actually tomorrow evening with my friend and coach, Liz Haber-Zambrano. Liz is amazing. She's just an incredible lady, incredible woman, amazing person. And she's really, I'd say she's kind of a master of this conversation around polarity, around navigating the masculine and feminine energies and the dynamics and how does this all work and what's it all about, right? And really understanding that. So we have this workshop coming up, and I've been posting some things on social media to kind of promote the workshop and pique interest. And I've been noticing a lot of misunderstanding. I've been noticing a lot of confusion, and it's sad for me to see, and it's painful to see this because, what I find more and more is that there is an isolation of women in their experience and an isolation of men in their experience. And the rift between the two is becoming, it seems, and this may not be 100% factual, but it seems it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And it seems the resistance and the resentment on both sides is becoming more and more and more and more intense. And I do spend like most of my time dealing with the challenges that women face, right? How to navigate their relationships with men, how to ask for what you want, how to challenge a man to step up for you, how to walk away when he doesn't, right? Like all this stuff. Like I spend most of my time really working with the challenges and the concerns that women face. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's completely valid. It's important work. But I find that spending too much time on one side of the conversation can lead us to believe or to feel that it's the only side of the conversation. And there's actually another side of the conversation that men are on, where they feel very much the same way that women feel in many, many respects. They feel misunderstood. They feel like they give their best. They feel like they try so hard. They feel like they do everything they can. And like, no matter what they do, they just hit a wall. They're rejected. They're ignored. They're left alone. They're made second best. They're friend zoned. They're, whatever. And the point today is not to say that one side is right and the other side is wrong. It's not to say that, one concern is more valid than another concern. But the point today is actually to say that all of the concerns are valid. And it's to bring awareness to the fact that this is challenging for everyone, right? Like every single person who is out there trying to create a relationship, or every single person who is in a relationship and they're struggling in the relationship and they're trying to have the relationship be more of what they want it to be, right? Like every single person who is in any of these scenarios is struggling. Like they're having a hard time. It is challenging. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Like it doesn't matter. Like it is challenging. It is challenging for everybody. And I think if for you personally, you as an individual, if you can for yourself soften a little bit, right? Recognize that these are not so much your problems as they are human problems, right? Like it is not what men have done to you or what women have done to you, but rather it's what we have all done to each other, what we're doing to each other, what we continue to do to each other. And if you can understand that we all feel the same way to a large degree, right? Like we all feel this pain to a large degree. And sometimes we're in the position of having the upper hand and we feel a little bit better about it. Sometimes we're in the position of not having the upper hand and we feel a little bit worse about it. But we are all facing these challenges. And as I was preparing for today's episode, I thought of a quote it's not even a quote, it's more of a story, but it's something I read in Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly. She talks about how she, for many years, traveled the world. And if you don't know Brené Brown's work, I mean, I think you should look into it because it's powerful and she's brilliant. She's, one of the most insightful teachers on the planet, I think. But she studies primarily shame, and I think her work has expanded a lot over the years, but primarily what she's always studied was shame. And she's probably the foremost expert in shame. And those of you who have been through the Inspired Love program or have heard me talk about it, like shame is a big thing that we work with in the program. In my understanding, like shame is really like the biggest thing that we need to heal in order to live fully free, expressed, authentic lives. Anyway, I was reading Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly, and she shares the story of how she was traveling the world for many years, speaking in front of large audiences, delivering these lectures on shame and healing from shame and, developing a better relationship with shame and all this stuff. I don't think this is a representation of who she is now, but I think this was early on in her career. And at one of her talks, a man came up to her at the end of the talk. And he said to her that, I really appreciate everything you shared on shame. I thought it was very helpful and very powerful, and it touched me. But I'm curious to know what you can share about men and shame, because everything you talked about was regarding women and shame. And I'm wondering what men are supposed to do when they want to heal from this. And what Brené Brown said to him was, she said, well, thank you for the question, but, I really don't work with men's issues. I just work with women's issues. So I really don't have a lot to share on that topic. And he said to her, oh, how convenient. And she's like, excuse me, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you mean, how convenient? And this is what he said to her. He said, you see the woman and those two girls over there pointing to his wife and his daughters? And she said, yeah. He goes, the ones that you just autographed their books? And she goes, yeah, I see them. And he goes, okay, that's my family. And he says, those three ladies would rather see me die on top of my white horse than watch me fall off of it. And what he was communicating, and, she elaborates on this as she shares more about the story, but what he was communicating when he said that is he was communicating the fact that in my life with my wife and my daughters, there is no space for me to be vulnerable. there's no space for me to be human. There's no space for me to have a moment of weakness. There's no space for me to struggle. There's no space for me to be challenged, right? I have to be the strong, secure, tough, holding it all together. I have to be the rock for everyone all the time. And they cannot handle seeing me come down off of that pedestal. Now, I don't know him and his wife and his family and their situation. I don't know if that was true. I don't know if that was a misinterpretation. But what I do know is this. I know that many, many men, if not all men to some degree, carry the weight of this. And I know this because I've seen it in myself. I see it in my friends. Like I know this because I've experienced it firsthand. And I was thinking about this the other day is when I was 5 years old, I made a conscious decision to never cry again. At 5 years old, I have a distinct memory of at 5 years old making a conscious decision to never cry again. Now, I'm thinking about that and like I'm looking at it going like, where did that idea even come from? Like that didn't come from my mom. My mom never shamed me for crying. My mom always like welcomed my emotion. That didn't come from my mom. I don't even think it came from like my grandparents. I don't remember my grandmother or my grandfather at any point telling me that like I couldn't cry or I couldn't be emotional. But yet somehow by the age of 5 years old, I thought that it was important enough for me to not cry that I made a decision to stop crying altogether. And what I'm getting at here is that was not directly enforced by my mom or my grandparents, who those were the adults who were present in my life at that time. And they didn't enforce that idea on me. So somehow, by the time I was 5 years old, just being a young boy in this culture, without it having overtly pushed on me in any way, I still got the impression that I shouldn't cry, that I shouldn't show emotion. I honestly can't even tell you where that came from. I don't know how I got that impression. The only thing I know is that when I was 5 years old, I made that decision. And I remember, I have a distinct memory shortly after making that decision that I was with a friend of mine. His name was Levi, and we were both 5-year-old boys who were out riding our bikes around the neighborhood. And I remember hanging out with Levi, and he fell and wrecked his bike and skinned his knee, and he started crying. And I remember standing over him, and this was maybe a month after I made the decision or something like this. But I remember standing over Levi and saying to him, don't cry. Don't cry. You don't have to cry. I learned how to not cry. You can learn to not cry too. Like this is what me, a little 5-year-old Shane, is saying to little 5-year-old Levi when he fell and scraped his knee. And this is the box that men are put in at a young age. Again, 5 years old, younger even. I mean, let's put this in context. I had a pretty loving and supportive and emotionally attuned mother. And I still made that decision by the age of 5. What if I hadn't? What if I had had a harsh, like critical mother? Or what if I had had like my dad wasn't around when I was a kid? What if my dad had been around? And my dad's like a tough dude, right? Like my dad did not welcome crying. So like, what about the boys who don't have the kind of environment I had? How much earlier do they get those impressions? How much quicker do they shut down their emotionality? And so I want to read this comment because I put up a post the other day on Instagram, and the post was the 10 biggest complaints that men have around women and dating. And I shared this post with the intention of very much the conversation I'm having now is like, hey, I just want to bring awareness that like there's more than one side to the conversation. I want to create some compassion for the fact that like men in a lot of ways feel the same way that women do. Like it's not one group perpetrating the other group, that like we're doing it to each other and everybody's having a hard time. And so I put this post together and I want to read this comment. And like there were some people that were just nasty. Like I remember one comment was like, oh yeah, boo fucking who for men. And like, there were some people who were just nasty, but the comment I'm going to read isn't nasty. The comment I'm going to read is a misunderstanding, but it's a misunderstanding that is causing a lot of suffering for both men and women. So I really want to illuminate this because it's like, this is what we need to heal right here. So I'm going to read this comment. And she says, all these complaints are made from low self-esteem people. In this case, men in their feminine energy. There is no woman to complain about these if there is a masculine man in front of them. Above all, masculine men don't complain by default. It is in their DNA to support and encourage others due to their testosterone. You should make a study on testosterone levels of men nowadays. I've heard it's 50% lower than 10 years ago. Now, I don't want to discredit some of like the validity of what she's saying here. Like, I think there is validity in what she's saying about testosterone. I think there is validity in that testosterone is maybe lower these days than it was in the past. I think there is validity in that, but it's not a complete answer. And what I want to illuminate is this. She says, all these complaints are made by low self-esteem people. In this case, men in their feminine energy. And I just want to touch on a couple of what these complaints are, just so you understand the context of what we're talking about here. So one is that men often feel that women are not clear about what they want from a relationship. So like men often feel like they show up and they're like, hey, like, you know, like trying to move things forward, and the woman won't be clear. She's wishy-washy about it, right? Men often feel that they try to make their woman happy, but she won't let them know what they need to do to make her happy, right? So they're like, I want to make you happy, but I just don't know what to do. And you won't be clear with me about what you want. Like you want me to intuitively know what you want and somehow just, you know exactly how to make you happy without you communicating about it. Right. Like ghosting is another one. Like men get ghosted just as often as women, right? Having mixed signals or hot and cold, like men experience that just as often as women do. Another one that men share is like financial expectation, right? They feel there's this expectation that they are supposed to like pay for and provide for everything. And even if they are willing and able to do that, it's not about their willingness or their ability to do that, but it's about this expectation that as soon as they meet a woman, like they're expected to immediately provide for everything. And it leaves men feeling like, am I just being taken advantage of? Like, is she just using me to pay for things? Like, does she even really like me? Right. So, and I'm just giving an example of some of the complaints, because what I'm getting at here is this comment that I'm reading is attributing all of these complaints to men with low self-esteem operating in their feminine energy. And if we were to take this comment as though it's the way it should be, what we would have to deduce from that is that, okay, so men are never allowed to struggle with low self-esteem. If they do, that means they're too feminine. That men are never allowed to have emotional responses to the challenges they face in life. That if a man ever complains about anything, that means he's low in testosterone and not enough of a man. I mean, like, I understand that there's validity to what she's saying. Yes, strong masculine men protect and provide. Strong masculine men don't sit around and complain. They take charge and make shit happen, right? Like there is validity to her points. I'm not saying that there is no validity to her points. But what I'm saying is the way she's laying it out here is dehumanizing to men. Because what she's saying is men need to always be strong. They need to always be emotionally collected. They need to always have high self-esteem and strong confidence. And she puts men into a certain box of who they're supposed to be. And she goes on to say that if men were always this way, women would not have problems. Right? I'm going to reread what she said. There is no woman to complain about these things if a masculine man is in front of them. Right? So she's saying the only reason women complain about these things is because men aren't masculine enough. And if men were more of who they were supposed to be, women could be more of who they're supposed to be, and everybody would be happy, but ultimately it's men's fault for not being masculine enough. And I just want to say, like, there is no compassion in that. I understand these masculine ideals and these feminine ideals, which tomorrow night in the Polarity workshop, we're going to talk about what these are, right? These are beautiful things to strive towards, right? Of the man being a strong provider and protector, right? Of being like a compassionate masculine force. Like that is a beautiful thing for men to aspire to. And for women to be soft and warm and nurturing and like open-hearted and like, I mean, that is a beautiful thing for women to aspire to. But to put either of us in a box and to say that that's who we're supposed to be all the time, or to shame complex, dynamic human beings for stepping outside of some role that somebody who thinks they know something has assigned to them. Like, who the fuck thinks they have the right to tell any human being who they're supposed to be all the time? Seriously, who thinks they have the right to do that? And especially in today's world, when in terms of like gender expression, we're more flexible and more accepting than we have ever been before. It seems like, you know, in one respect, like we're more progressive than ever. And in another respect, it's like we're going back to the Stone Ages. And I understand where comments like this come from. I do. Comments like this come from a body of work that originated in Tantra, which is thousands and thousands of years old. It's a science that comes from India, which is thousands of years old. In Tantric teachings, they teach about masculine energy and feminine energy. And by the way, in the Polarity workshop tomorrow night, this is what we're going to be going over. We're going to be talking about all of this and how it works. But in Tantra, they talk about masculine energy and feminine energy. And they talk about how these energies interact. But these energies are independent of gender. So if you're a woman, you have masculine and feminine energy in you. And if you're a man, you have masculine and feminine energy in you. And so the energy it exists in all of us. It's complex, dynamic energy that exists in all of us. We all have all of it. And the idea is not for men to operate entirely in their masculine energy and for women to operate entirely in their feminine energy. But the idea is actually for us both to have a healthy, strong relationship with both of these energies. And by me as a man, maybe I'm primarily masculine, maybe 75% of the time, and I'm not saying that's an exact number, I'm just using that as an example. Maybe 75% of the time I operate in my masculine energy, but I have a healthy 25% where I'm in touch with that feminine energy. And what does that offer me? That offers me the ability to be compassionate. That offers me the ability to be nurturing. Like here's the thing. If I'm a father, and I'm a dog dad right now, I'm not a human dad, but I will be soon. And so if I'm a father, I need access to my feminine energy because there needs to be a part of me that is able to pick up my child and hold them and nurture them. And if I don't have the ability to do that, my child is going to feel disconnected from their father. They're going to have daddy issues because dad couldn't figure out how to access more of his feminine energy and be open and receptive to his child. So he kept this tough, stoic, masculine exterior. He was never warm. He was never open. He was never inviting. And now all his kids have daddy issues because of it. And going back to the comment I was just talking about and the comment I just read, if men were to be across the board who she is suggesting they should be, men would become incredibly toxic. Because it is the balance of the masculine with the feminine inside of a man that allows him to be a healthy, compassionate, emotionally attuned, emotionally available, masculine man. It is him being primarily in his masculine while having a healthy, connected relationship to his feminine that allows him to be all of that. And if he doesn't have that, then he's going to become what we call the toxic masculine. And the toxic masculine is all the things women complain about. How they don't call back. They have sex with you and never call again. And they're not interested in a relationship. They're just interested in taking whatever they can get from you. Like, you've got to understand, all of the things that women complain about men are men who are not in touch with their own feminine aspects. And we could say the same thing about the opposite side too. And we're going to talk more about this in the polarity workshop. So I don't want to like do a double of the polarity workshop right now, because we're going to be able to get into that. But I'm just trying to help you understand that it is vitally important for all of us, men and women. It is vitally important that we have freedom of expression, that we are able to live our lives in the way that feels most authentic and most true for us, and that we are able to be received and accepted and loved in that, without being shamed for not living up to some standard of what we think a man is supposed to be or a woman is supposed to be. There's a man called David Data, and if you look into this kind of work about masculine and feminine energy, he's going to be cited as maybe like the father of it, or the person who brought it into, he's the person who made it big. Let's say he's the one who took it from the ancient tantric teachings that are thousands and thousands of years old. And he's the one who took it from those and brought it into something that's mainstream. He's the one who made this mainstream. And if you read his work, and I've read his work pretty extensively, and what he says in his work is, he makes it very clear, is that these energies are present in all people. These energies are present in everyone, in a relationship, for there to be attraction, for there to be magnetism, for there to be polarity, right? The magnetic kind of polarity attraction that you want to feel with your partner. In order for that to exist, you need, it's like if you think of the way two magnets are attracted to each other, right? You need the masculine polarity and the feminine polarity. And those two polarities create attraction. So when, I'll just say, for example, like when I'm in my masculine and my wife is in her feminine, there's a certain magnetism and attraction that happens there. When we're both in our masculine, you know, when I've been working all day and she's been working all day and we both like get home from work and we're in our masculine, like it's more about business, right? Like there's not a lot of like lovey, juicy connection happening. It's more about business. It's more about like, okay, we got to cook dinner. We got to get the dishes done. We got to make shit happen. But that's not wrong. That's just two human beings moving through different energetic expressions of who they can be. And yeah, you know, if we want to get like lovey and sexy and all that, then she's going to have to step out of her masculine and into her feminine in order for us to get there. Right? Or if I was in my feminine, which I don't live in my feminine often, but if I was, I would need to step into my masculine for that attraction to be there. But that doesn't mean we need to live there every moment of every day all the time. And actually what David Data says in his teachings is that it doesn't matter if there are two men. In order for attraction to be there, one needs to be masculine, one needs to be feminine. Same thing if there are two women. In order for attraction to be there, one needs to be masculine and one needs to be feminine. If there's a man and a woman, in order for attraction to be there, one needs to be masculine and one needs to be feminine. And it doesn't even necessarily matter which one it is. Now, if we were to say, and this is where I think people get really bent out of shape around this conversation, because if we were to say that, okay, it's perfectly acceptable for a woman to be primarily masculine and for a man to be primarily feminine, and we were to say, well, that's a perfectly acceptable relationship, right? If it's not about gender, if it's just about energy, well, why can't that work? Well, it actually could. It actually could work. It would just look very different from the traditional relationships that most of us are accustomed to. It would just be a different dynamic that they have. But who are we to say that's wrong? Now, if I were to apply that in my relationship, if I were to become primarily the feminine person in my relationship and my wife were to become primarily the masculine person in our relationship, I wouldn't like that, right? I would feel emasculated. I would feel like I was being a little girl. It would not feel good to me. She wouldn't like it either. She would feel like it wouldn't feel good to her. It's not the way she feels best. It's not the way she wants to be, right? So in our relationship, there's a natural tendency for, her to gravitate into her feminine and for me to gravitate into my masculine. There's a natural tendency for that to happen, but it's not always that way. And what I'm getting at here is it doesn't always need to be any particular way, right? It can be however the two of you create it to be in your relationship. But now I want to get into the topic for today. And I know I've been talking for a while now without actually getting into the topic. But I want to get into the topic. And I feel like it was important to kind of discuss all of this and set all of this up so that the topic would make sense. Because what we're talking about today is, okay, how do you nurture a man to bring out the best in him? And I was actually talking to Rami, my assistant, yesterday, and she was talking about in her relationship how she's created a space for her partner to cry with her, right? She's created a space where he can really open up. And this guy is ex-military. This is a guy who has lived a very masculine life. And now in this relationship, and I don't know if this is the first time he's ever been this way. I mean, from what I understand, he's done a lot to be able to open up, and he seems like a very open guy. I've never met him. I just know this from what she shares. But he's ex-military and all of this, and he's able to open up with her. He's able to open himself up and share with her and cry with her and reveal himself to her and be vulnerable with her. And as a result, she shares about how safe she feels with him, right? How he stands up for her and protects her and prioritizes her and makes her important. And she says she has never ever felt this safe in a relationship. Now, it's pretty powerful how his ability to feel that safe with her creates in him a desire to want to be her protector, to want to be her provider. Something else she's been sharing about him, he's offering not pay your bills, but I want to be able to support you in certain ways financially so that you can do more of what you want to do and live the life you want to live. And she's very uncomfortable receiving the support. Here's this guy who's more and more wanting to give her more, wanting to provide for her more, wanting to protect her more, to the point where she's even uncomfortable with it, to the point where she's even I'm having a hard time receiving everything he wants to give. And I do think that is a direct reflection of the space that she has given him in the relationship. Giving him the space to step out of that role, of that hyper-masculine role. Giving him the space to be vulnerable, to be sensitive. Creating a space for him that he probably doesn't have anywhere else in his life. He doesn't have that at work. He doesn't have that with his kids. I mean, really, where else in his life does he have a space like that? Before he met her, and they haven't even been together that long, a few months, several months, right? But before he met her, where could he go for that? She has created something with him that means more to him than probably just about anything else in his life. So you better believe he's going to do everything he can to protect and cherish and honor that relationship with her. He's going to do everything he can to keep her in his life because she has given him something that he can't find anywhere else. And, if we touch on the topic of mothering, because I know that's a big topic right now, and I know it's something that a lot of women fall into with their partners, because they feel like their partner isn't doing enough. They feel like their partner isn't making that effort or showing up. And so they try to step in there and tell him how to do it, or when to do it, or why to do it, or criticize the way he's currently doing it and saying, you need to do it like this instead of this way. And what happens to a man when you fall into that mothering role is one of two things. He will either become lazy and just let you do all of it, right? He'll just let you do all of it. Like, just not interested, right? Or he'll resent you. He'll feel emasculated. He'll feel like you're taking away his autonomy, his authority, his ability to choose for himself, his ability to make his own decisions, ability to do something the way he wants it done, right? He'll feel emasculated. He'll feel like you're taking that from him. And so then what's going to happen is he's not going to want to provide and protect. He's going to be resentful. He's going to feel like his expression is being stifled. He's going to feel like his masculinity is being stifled. He's going to feel like, I wanted to be romantic. I wanted to take her out and show her a nice experience. I wanted to do this for her and do that for her. But every time I tried to do it, she told me how it was wrong and how she needed it done differently. And so he just loses interest in making that kind of effort. Right? He just loses interest in trying those kinds of things. It's counterintuitive here, because it's not about men being more feminine, right? Because there are men who are feminine, and that has a very specific look to it. I mean, like, if you look at the typical gay man, right? Like, that is a femininely oriented man, a male body, a masculine body with a feminine dominant energy, right? Like your typical gay man, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a masculine body, a male body with a dominant feminine energy. I'm not saying that men should be like that, right? They can still have the dominant masculine energy. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a man being like that. Maybe he wouldn't be attractive to a lot of women if he was like that, but I'm not going to sit here and say he shouldn't be that way, or shame him if he wants to live that way. He might have a hard time with women if he's that way, but that's a different story. But he can still be that dominant masculine man. But he needs the attunement to his own feminine energy. He needs to be able to access and express that within himself. So I think there are really two things here. One is he needs to be able to access and express that within himself. Two, he needs a safe space in which he can do that without judgment or without being seen as less of a man. And I'm not necessarily saying this is my listeners, because I think I have a very conscious group of listeners, so it might not be that I'm speaking to. But I will say that a lot of women really struggle with masculine vulnerability. The moment he steps out of that role as the ultimate provider and protector, you feel unsafe. And again, I'm not necessarily talking to you, the listener. I may be. If the shoe fits, then you wear it, right? But I'm talking to the you out there, whoever this is that the moment he comes down from that ultimate place of power, you no longer feel safe. The moment he gets in touch with the feminine aspects of himself, you doubt him, you doubt the relationship, you doubt yourself. And what that comes from as a reflection is you having no connection to the masculine aspects of yourself. If you think about it like this, the masculine energy is the container and the feminine energy is that which fills the container, right? If you think about I think about water running down a mountain, right? The masculine energy is the mountain, the feminine energy is the water. The masculine creates the structure, and then the feminine can flow through the structure. And so what you need in a deep, loving, and intimate relationship is not only the ability for each of you to play your respective roles as masculine and feminine, which is what most of the people out there are teaching. That's only half of the conversation. You need not only the ability to operate in your respective roles, but you also need the ability to switch roles sometimes. Like if I go back to the example I shared about my assistant, right? The ability to hold her partner in those moments when he needs to cry, when he needs to become the water, she becomes the mountain. This doesn't define every aspect of their relationship day in and day out all the time. But it does define the moments when it's happening. Right? She is able to become the structure that he can flow through. And she is able to do that because she's connected to her own masculine energy. Right? She's able to do that because he can step out of that role for a minute without her immediately feeling unsafe. He can step out of that role for a minute without her immediately questioning the relationship. And so what you have is a deepening of the connection, a deepening of the intimacy, a deepening of the love that they share, because she's able to hold that space for him. I go back to the quote from the Brené Brown book. They would rather see me die on top of my white horse than fall off of it. And that's a man who's not nurtured in his relationship. That's a man who feels forced into a certain role of who he's supposed to be and not allowed to step out of it. And I'll say, as a man, as a boy who at 5 years old made a decision that I would never cry again. And I want to share on that note, like, just so you can understand how that decision played out in my life, I could count on one hand the times I've cried since. Even with all the work I've done, I still don't cry. It's just a decision I made a long time ago. And so that's how it gets wired into us. And what I was starting to say is, as a young boy who decided not to cry at 5 years old, I could tell you, it's heavy to carry that. Now, I want to make it really practical, because I know, especially a lot of the listeners, a lot of you are probably hearing this and saying, like, "Oh my God, I just wish I had a man who was willing to open up to me like that," right? Like I'm all for holding the space. I just wish I had a man who would open up to me like that, right? And I know a lot of you may be feeling that way too. And so there are two aspects to this, and I've been talking a lot about holding the space for it. The other aspect is that he needs to be ready to go there, right? He needs to be available for that. He needs to be emotionally attuned. And I'm not saying he needs to cry his eyes out. Like I said, I don't really cry. I mean, I cried when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. Like I bawled my eyes out. I cried. I'm trying to think. There have been a few other isolated instances where like I've really bawled my eyes out, but it's been few and far between. But I am still relatively emotionally attuned. I'm able to get in touch with what I'm feeling. I'm able to talk about it. I'm able to express it, right? So it's not that he has to be bawling his eyes out all the time, but it is that he has to have that emotional awareness and be in touch with that and be able to talk about that, be able to communicate that. If you meet a man, if you find a man who is able to be in touch with his own emotions like that, who is able to communicate it, then you want to notice what that activates in you. What does that bring up in you? Right? Does it make you feel insecure? Does it make you feel unsafe? Are you able to hold that space? And if not, it's not a judgment or a criticism, but it's just something to bring awareness to. It's just something to go, oh, wow, that makes me really uncomfortable. And then start to challenge that, because what you're actually doing in that is you're strengthening the masculine side of yourself. You're strengthening the masculine side of yourself. And it's not that by strengthening that or by building that or by feeding that you're going to become hypermasculine. No, you'll just become a more complete individual. You'll just become more complete within yourself and within your own right. That's all that's going to happen. It will actually feel better for you, because rather than constantly being dependent on another person for security, in the times, and again, I'm not saying that it needs to be this way all the time, but in the times when he cannot be that for you for whatever reason, maybe he's going through a hard time, maybe he's going on a trip, maybe like whatever, but in the moments he can't be that for you, you will still have that. And you see, healthy relationships, I think like if we look at this just across the board in terms of what a healthy relationship looks like, healthy relationships are not depending on your partner for anything 100%. Right? Like if you show up to a relationship and you're like, okay, from now on, it's your job to provide X, Y, or Z for me 100% of the time, that's not a fair position to put your partner in. On any criteria, anything across the board. But the way it works is like, okay, if we weren't together, right? If we were single, if we were in our own lives, it would be up to me as an individual to meet all of my needs. Now that we're partnered, now that we're together, I have the luxury. It's not that I'm entitled to this. A lot of us feel like we're entitled to our partner meeting our needs. No, we're not entitled to it. It's a luxury, right? So now that I'm no longer alone in the world, now that I'm sharing my life with someone, I have the luxury of not having to meet all my needs on my own, right? Now that I'm partnered with someone, I have the luxury of them being able to meet certain needs at certain times. And in a partnership, what you do is you say, hey, you're really great at meeting these needs. Why don't you be responsible for that? And I'm really great at meeting these needs. Why don't I be responsible for that? Men are often very attuned to be in the business world and make money. Women are often very attuned to stay at home and take care of children. And so in a lot of situations, it makes sense when you're partnered with someone to say, hey, you're really good at business and making money. You take care of that. I'm better with the kids being at home. I'll take care of that. And if in your relationship, that is a dynamic that allows everyone to thrive, that is a dynamic that supports everybody involved, if that's the way it is, wonderful. Go all the way with it. But to start saying that that's the way it should be for everyone, or to start shaming people because they don't do it the same way you do it, that's when it becomes a problem. And I meant to touch on this earlier, but I got away from it, and I want to circle back to it. I was talking about David Data, and David Data is the guy who brought these tantric teachings mainstream. And ever since he wrote the book, The Way of the Superior Man, he wrote many other books. His work has been a sensation. And that is when this conversation about masculine and feminine energy became mainstream. And I mentioned this earlier, is that in his work, right? In his work, he even says that it's not about gender, it's about energy. And we all have these energies in us. But in order to simplify his work And if you read The Way of the Superior Man or you read any of his popular books, like he says this in the book, he says, this does not apply to gender. We all have these energies within us. But for simplicity's sake, in order to clearly demonstrate these principles, I'm going to use examples of masculine men and feminine women, because that is going to be the clearest way for me to demonstrate this conversation and have you see these principles and be able to understand them. What people who didn't really understand his work, and I see a lot of polarity coaches on Instagram, and it's even on social media, this conversation around polarity has become particularly heightened. And for this very reason is because people either love it or they hate it. And so when people identify themselves as a polarity coach and they start telling everybody men are supposed to be like this, women are supposed to be like this, they get a bunch of people saying, yeah, I agree with that. Or no, that's bullshit. I don't agree with that. And they get a lot of people arguing in the comments and their engagement goes through the roof. And so lots of people have become very popular very quickly being a, quote, polarity coach. But if you really look at some of these people, because at first I started following some of these people, I was like, oh, this is great information. I like what they're doing. And then I started really looking at what they were teaching. And I started to see how toxic and dehumanizing it is. And again, these are people that have taken work that David Data and, people who took his work and misunderstood it, then taught other people, who then taught other people, who then taught other people. And it has become like this polarity conversation has become a very watered down version of basically judging who men are supposed to be and who women are supposed to be. And I see some of these coaches, anytime someone asks a question, they only have one answer. They say either you're too masculine or he's too feminine, and that's your problem. And as a coach, I don't know what kind of work these other people are doing, but as someone who is literally in the trenches with people and with couples and in my own marriage, I can't find any possible way that would actually be a healthy dynamic to have 100% all the time in an actual relationship. And so if based on real work with my clients, real experience in my own relationship, if it doesn't work there, then it doesn't really work at all. It's just a theory that people are teaching to get engagement on social media, and people are buying into it because of comments like the one I read earlier. Right? It's a really easy scapegoat to say, well, if men were just more masculine, I wouldn't have any problems. It's a really easy scapegoat rather than saying, wow, maybe I really need to look at how I relate. Maybe I really need to look at my own judgments, at my own assumptions, at my own fears, at my own attachment wounds. Maybe it's not as simple as he's just not enough of a man. Maybe there's something else going on here. And so in today's conversation, I really want to sum it up. And I want to say is that, you want to recognize what it feels like when you start to mother a man, right? You just want to notice, what does that feel like inside your body when you start to mother a man, right? And mothering comes from the fear that he's not going to do it on its own. He's not going to be the man I want him to be on his own. So I got to intervene and make him into the man I want him to be. And just start to notice what that feels like, which by the way, that is a masculine approach, right? The mothering, I know we don't think of mothers as masculine, but the mothering is a masculine approach, right? When you start stepping in and saying, he's not going to do it on his own, I need to do it for him. That's a masculine approach. So notice what that feels like when you start doing that, right? And just, if you can identify what that feels like in your body, when you start, I gotta sit down and push another conversation about the relationship because he's never going to bring it up, right? Like you start, I gotta send him a podcast to listen to because he doesn't want to educate himself. I gotta, schedule a therapist appointment for him because he won't go, right? Like you start doing all this stuff for him. Notice what that feels like. Just get present to what it feels like in your body to be in that energy. And just start to affirm to yourself that I don't want to feel like this. When you make a commitment to yourself that you don't want to feel that way, any relationship that kind of forces you to feel that way is just going to become a turnoff to you, right? You're just going to, like, when you meet someone and they have no initiative, they have no like motivation, right? When you meet someone and it's just like, when it's like that, you're just going to start to be like, this relationship just doesn't feel good to me. And as you start to gravitate away from the people who force you into that mothering energy, you will start to gravitate toward men who stand on their own feet, men who aren't looking for a mother, men who know what they want, men who know where they're going, men who know what they want with you. Right? Like you're going to start to gravitate towards people like that. The less willing you are to live in that energy, the less likely you are to attract that energy into your life. As you get more comfortable just not being willing to mother anybody, and you start to gravitate towards and attract men who kind of stand on their own and they know what they want. They're their own person. They know what they're looking for. Those men, I'm not going to say all of them, but a portion of them are also quite evolved, quite emotionally in tune, because it kind of comes with the territory, right? The men who stand on their own feet, they also want to know how to be better. They also want to know how to have the best possible life. They may not have learned all the same things that you've learned, but they're on their path. They're learning and they're growing. And then the two of you can create your own dynamic together. You can find the right balance of masculine and feminine energy that works for the two of you. You can find the gender roles that work for the two of you. Right? See, some people both work and both raise the kids. Some people, neither one of them work. Some people live out of a van and that's what I mean is there are so many different ways to live. There are so many different ways to relate. And what you want is not to live up to some kind of external standard that you saw on Instagram that's being pushed upon you. But what you actually want is the deepest and realest possible connection that you can have with your partner, where you both feel deeply loved and seen and validated and cherished and respected and honored. And for the unique individuals that you are, that might mean that you're 90% in your respective energy and 10% in the opposite energy. It might mean you're 75-25. It might mean you're 50-50. But it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is what works for you. And so I know what I'm saying here, if you go look at a lot of the people who are coaching this on social media, what I'm saying here is going to be the opposite. And they're going to say that I am coaching you to find weak men. And they're going to tell you all this kind of stuff. And what I'm going to say is, I hope your own internal wisdom can help you understand a deeper message here, can help you understand a more authentic message that is more honoring and true to the individuals that we are. You know, we've all grown up in a world that told us who we were supposed to be. We've all grown up in a world that had no real value for the individual, right? The individual was a cog in a society, and we've been pushed into certain roles of who we're supposed to be to support our family or our legacy or our community or our society. And from the time we were born, our parents had agendas for us and everyone else has had agendas for us. And all this mainstream polarity conversation is another agenda of who we're supposed to be that is stifling the authenticity of who we are. And if you want healthy, loving relationships, I promise you that's not going to help. And you can learn it the easy way or you can learn it the hard way. But if you can really open your heart enough to have a holistic and compassionate view of who we are as human beings, and whoever you partner with, give them the space to explore their authenticity. And when something bothers you, I'm not saying you just give them freedom to be, whatever with no regard for you. When something bothers you, you talk about it. But you don't try to limit or force who they're supposed to be. This is the last thing I'll say. But a mentor of mine, he used to say this, and I've kind of adopted it. My wife and I laugh about it. But a mentor of mine, he used to say that he said, I wake up with a different woman every day. And he's married, been married for like 50 years or something crazy like that. Been married a long time. But what he was saying is like his wife is constantly changing. He's like, I never know who I'm going to wake up next to. Right? Like it's like our love, our relationship is a constant unfolding adventure. I never know who I'm waking up to the next morning. And I've said that to my wife and we laugh about it. And same thing for her, right? I'm not the person she met when we met all those years ago, right? So it's like we're always waking up to new people. Our relationship is a constant unfolding. And our fear makes us want to control that and say, no, you need to be like this. Right? Our fear makes us want to stifle that and say, no, you need to be like this because when you're like this, it makes me feel safe. And long term, any form of that will kill your love. It will kill your passion, your intimacy, your romance. It will kill all of it. But opening your heart enough to fully encourage your partner to be the most authentic version of themselves and to just be in love with and delighted by the continued new inventions of self they come up with, right? To just fall in love with the unfolding of who they become and just to constantly just think they're more and more amazing with every new iteration of themselves and to encourage and support that. That's what love is like. And so I want to end with that message today. And I want to say that the Polarity workshop is coming up tomorrow evening. So I do want to invite everybody to, if you want to dive into a deeper conversation around polarity that isn't about, forcing people into assumptive roles of who they should be, but is more about honoring the authenticity of an individual and having healthy, cohesive relationships between men and women while honoring the authenticity of an individual. That's what this conversation is about. And I think it's going to be a much more elevated conversation than most of the workshops or teachings that you see around this. So I definitely want to invite all of you to that. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to leave the link to sign up for the workshop below that. It's going to be tomorrow night. When I'm recording this, it's Tuesday, March 19th. So we're talking about March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be when the workshop is held. So hopefully many of you will be there to connect around that. Looking forward to that. Aside from that, thank you, everybody. So much love to all of you. And lots of love and blessings. Thanks for being on with me today and tuning into the show. And I'll see you back here next Tuesday. Lots of love, everybody. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @theliving_relationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.